Imagine a trial where the defense lawyer sleeps during the proceedings. Unfortunately, one doesn't have to imagine, for a number of people now know about quite a few cases where lawyers have slept in court during murder trials. The clients were convicted, appeals were denied, and they were later executed. Imagine a trial where the defense lawyer was drunk or on drugs. As in the case of sleeping lawyers, the courts of the land have traditionally found a drunk or drug lawyer to be an insufficient basis for reversing a conviction. Men have been executed in the United States of America after trials by judges where their lawyer was either drunk or drugged. Needless to say, these examples are serious challenges to the idea that some defense lawyers serve the interests of their clients first and foremost. From North Carolina comes a case that makes drunken, drugged, or even sleeping lawyers look like paragons of virtue. It was in the post-conviction hearings of Russell Tucker that David B. Smith, Esquire, was appointed for his defense. Shortly after meeting his client for the first time, Smith would later note, quote, "At the end of the visit, I decided that I did not like Mr. Tucker," unquote. Smith, a former prosecutor for over 20 years, would later state in a sworn affidavit, "My own beliefs against capital punishment were severely challenged as I read the trial transcripts in preparation for post-conviction relief. That research and preparation led him to the conclusion that, quote, Mr. Tucker should be executed," unquote. Smith's affidavit stated his wishes cleanly. Quote, "I decided that Mr. Tucker deserved to die, and I would not do anything to prevent his execution," unquote. Smith then deliberately missed a court deadline for filing an appeal in Tucker's case, thereby setting the stage for his client's execution. North Carolina set a deadline for Tucker that Smith couldn't ignore, an execution set for December the 7th, the year 2000, which has since been stayed. Smith, in his own words, had become an agent of the state. What pushed him to file was his client's pending execution. But what if Tucker was doing life? What if he was doing 10 years or 5 years? And what about the hundreds of men, thousands of women, an untold number of juveniles who had trials or appeals or any kind of proceeding where their lawyer hated them and acted as an agent of the state? What is rare is not defense lawyers who act as agents of the state, but lawyers who say they do. They serve the interests of the state, of the system. For how else can millions of their clients languish in jail cells across the nation? When lawyers may be drunk, drugged, or even sleep during trials, and courts are free to utter nonsense about the constitutional right of the assistance of competent counsel, what can such a right truly mean? So empty is that phrase that now a lawyer can double as defense counsel and prosecutor at the same trial. Meanwhile, as of this writing, Smith is still Mr. Tucker's attorney of record. Given the system, this is somehow fitting, isn't it? From death row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
I'm Asada Shakur. The first time I heard a tape of one of Mumia's radio broadcasts, it was the first time I fully understood why the United States government was so intent on putting him to death. Mumia, the only African political prisoner on death row, didn't use any inflammatory rhetoric. What he said was so clear, so true, that I had to stop everything and concentrate on his message. Mumia Abu-Jamal, journalist, husband, father, he is brilliant. He has the ability to say what needs to be said in the clearest, most vivid way. His language, his strength, and his intelligence remind me of one man, El-Hajj Malik Shabazz, otherwise known as Malcolm X. Mumia Abu-Jamal is a man who has truly carried on Malcolm's tradition and the tradition of so many of our freedom fighters who have risked their lives for the freedom of our people. This year, as I celebrated Malcolm's birthday, I couldn't stop thinking about Mumia. I couldn't stop thinking about the man who has spent over 15 years on death row and remains strong, committed, and beautiful. Mumia, political activist, revolutionary, and humanist, has followed faithfully in Malcolm's footsteps. We can feel Malcolm's energy working through Mumia. We can feel Mumia's energy carrying on Malcolm's legacy. If Malcolm X were alive today, I know he would be fighting to save Mumia's life. If Malcolm were alive today, I know he would be fighting to free all political prisoners. In the name of Malcolm X, I make a special appeal to you, sisters and brothers, to fight tooth and nail to save Mumia's life and to free him from the grips of his oppressors. As you honor our forefathers and foremothers, I urge you to honor our living heroes. When you honor the names of Nat Turner, Harriet Tubman, and Malcolm X, I urge you to honor the names of Geronimo Gijaga, Sundiata Acoli, Mutulu Shakur, and Mumia Abu-Jamal. I urge you not to forget and not to betray our living heroes. If we ignore their struggle, we are ignoring our own. If we betray our living history, then we are betraying ourselves. We could not save Malcolm X, but we can save Mumia. We can save him, and we must save him, because we love our brother, and we need our brother to help us fight for freedom. Free Mumia Abu-Jamal, free all political prisoners. Let us carry on our tradition to freedom.
Recent published reports have lamented the fact that Afro-American youth are remarkably resistant and virtually unresponsive to traditional big-name public relations and big-time sports figures when they utilize the major media to attempt to communicate with younger blacks. The study found deep and profound alienation amongst youth and a fundamental streak of fatalism about the promise of tomorrow. A sense that tomorrow may come, so let's live today, permeates youth consciousness. The youth, while they view large blocks of TV, perceive it from the position of outsiders, knowing that the dramas, comedies, and news programs are not designed for their consumption. Only the urbo-tech musical form known as rap touches them, for it is born of urban youth consciousness and speaks to them in their idiom about lives lived on the marginalia. It is this profound disassociation that forced members of the nouveau middle-class blacks to lament the youth as the lost generation. But are they really lost? And if so, to whom? The Martiniquan black revolutionary Frantz Fanon once opined that every generation must find its destiny, fulfill it, or betray it. In my father's generation, Southern-born of the late 1890s, their destiny was to move their families north to lands with a promise of a better life away from the hateful homelands in Dixie. The dreams of that generation, sparked by visions of new homes, better education, new cars, and prosperity, were, in relative terms, realized by some. But northbound Africans were never able to outrun the stigma of racism. By the time the 50s and 60s generation came of age, during the Nixon, Reagan, Bush eras, race once again defined the limits of black aspirations. And with the shifting of manufacturing jobs back down south and abroad, so went dreams of relative prosperity. The children of this generation, born into sobering poverty amidst shimmering opulence, watching while sinister politicians spit on their very existence, these youth are the hip-hop rap generation. Locked out of the legal means of material survival, looked down upon by predatory politicians and police, left with the least relevant educational opportunities, talked at with contempt and not talked to with love. Is there any question why such youth are alienated? Why the surprise? They look at the lives they live and don't see civil rights progress, but a drumbeat of civil repression by a state at war with their dreams. Why the surprise? This is not the lost generation. They are the children of the LA Rebellion, the children of the Move bombing, the children of the Black Panthers, and the grandchildren of Malcolm. Far from lost, they are probably the most aware generation since Nat Turner's. They are not so much lost as they are mislaid, discarded by their increasingly racist system that undermines their inherent worth. They are all potential revolutionaries with the historic power to transform our dull realities. If they are lost, then find them. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
All right, thanks for tuning in. We're going to have a podcast discussion right now with Gerald from the Labor Action Committee to free Mumia Abu-Jamal. Gerald, we're going to go over some history right now, but can you clarify for us what the purpose of this podcast is right now? Because this is an important moment that we're in.
Right. Recently, Mumia Abu-Jamal has been granted new rights to appeal his former conviction. And thus, we really want to emphasize that this is a unique moment in which, for the first time in 37 years, there has been a positive decision on his case, and it opens up the possibility of Mumia leaving prison and proving his innocence.
Great. So that's the really important moment that we're in. So we're going to need to go through a little bit of history to get clarity on that, both as a refresher for folks who have been involved in the campaign to free Mumia for a while, but also for those of us who maybe don't know the whole backstory, have heard his name, or maybe have never heard of Mumia.
That's right.
But all of that is in the service of getting to this really important moment that we're in, and emphasizing what we can do to lean into this moment and figure out what we can do to help take advantage of it.
That's right.
All right, let's dig in.
Okay. Mumia Abu-Jamal is one of the best known political prisoners in America. He was framed up and sentenced to the death penalty wrongfully for the death of Daniel Faulkner, a police officer in Philadelphia. And that was 1983. He has been in prison now for 37 years. In the 90s, we had a movement called Millions for Mumia, and this literally led to Mumia's case becoming a household word in America, Mumia's name being a household word. Mumia actually joined the Black Panther Party in Philadelphia when he was 15 years old. He was the Minister of Information. Now, that, of course, drew the attention of some of the authorities. So he actually drew the wrath of Frank Rizzo, the racist mayor of Philadelphia, for consistently uncovering and reporting on the cases of police brutality. This is after he was no longer a Panther. He became a journalist. The situation and the confrontation with the Rizzo regime rose to its highest point when, on August the 8th of 1978, Mayor Frank Rizzo ordered the police to evict the Move. The Move commune had they lived on Powelton in a single dwelling, in a large dwelling. And the police showed up to evacuate or to evict them. Now listen to this. We're talking about a situation where there were 600 police mobilized to evict a group of maybe 20 people. Here is what happened. The police surrounded the dwelling. Now anybody, I think a 6-year-old child would understand that you never form a circular firing squad if you're going to do a military action. Well, they surrounded this Powelton commune of Move, and somebody claimed that they heard a shot. Well, if they did, it was because of the police, because it was later on found out that the weapons that Move did have were all inoperative. They began shooting, an orgy of firing at the dwelling, and through that activity, the police shot they shot 6 policemen, they shot 3 firemen, and 1 policeman died from his wounds.
So the police shot themselves in the process of trying to evict a radical black organization from
That
their
is
housing.
correct.
And this is in Philadelphia, just to be clear. And this
Right.
is in 1978?
Yes, it is. So immediately, just hours after this raid, they had a press conference. And remember now, some of this was on television. The beating of Delbert Africa, when he was surrendering, was actually on television. They showed how the police were stomping him and pulling him by his hair after he had his hands up. And remember, the Move commune people never fired a single shot at the police because the weapons that were found were all inoperative. Okay. So at City Hall, Rizzo was blunt with the press. He expected them to close ranks in support of the police actions. Then, from the crowded pack of reporters, a young black journalist spoke out in the resonant tones of a radio broadcaster. He raised pointed questions about the official policy, the police story that Rizzo had just shared with the press. Mayor Rizzo exploded in fury because this young reporter, Mumia Abu-Jamal, had pointed out the stupidity of the police raid itself. And what Rizzo, what he said was a thinly veiled threat, and I have to quote this. He said, "They believe what you write and what you say." They being the people of Philadelphia. And it's got to stop. And one day, and I hope it's in my career, that you're going to have to be held accountable and responsible for what you do. This was a very thinly veiled threat against Mumia.
Gerald, can you give a little bit more background before we move forward about what was Mumia like as a journalist? Why was he? It seems like this wasn't the first time he covered some important black liberation struggle news. So can you say a little more about that?
Sure. Mumia had won the deserved moniker of the voice of the voiceless. And the reason he was described in that way is because he had the habit. He said, look, you told me in your school when I went to study to be a journalist that we should always show both sides of the argument. So he would bring in members of the community who were complaining about police brutality, and then he would invite the police to come and share their point of view. He invited Move to come in and talk about some of their conflicts with the police, and he would invite the police to come in and explain their point of view. Well, the police never showed up to defend their racist practices. So through this process, he was given the name the voice of the voiceless.
And this all kind of came to a head when he continued his practice in calling out the mayor after the attack on Move.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So in 1981, Mumia was falsely accused of murdering Philadelphia police officer Daniel Faulkner. In 1982, a corrupt, racist judge named Cebu framed Mumia and basically sentenced him to death. From the day Mumia Abu-Jamal was arrested, the Fraternal Order of Police, a kind of, I don't know what you call it, it's a political organization for police.
Some people have described it almost like a union, but it's more than that, right? It's like a very politicized body that advocates directly on behalf of the cops.
In fact, it's not. Most police are not in the Fraternal Order of the Police, but it does propaganda. It organizes campaigns. Whereas, for instance, let's say the police in our area of the country are usually in something called the Policemen's Benevolent Associations, which negotiate their economic contracts. Now, it's true that these so-called unions, and I want to challenge and say that police are not workers, and therefore they can't have unions, okay?
Right.
And in fact, they need to be expelled from all mass labor organizations. But they do have organization. And I tell you what, in a society where the population is not well organized, when you're organized, you get to impose your point of view more, completely. Okay, so from that day when Mumia was arrested, the Fraternal Order of Police and the state in general did all they could to silence this outstanding militant. Mumia was excluded from the courtroom by Judge Sabo during his trial. Now, I want to say this. Mumia Abu-Jamal wanted to defend himself, in part because he had just seen John Africa successfully defend himself and defeat the federal government in a weapons trial.
That is, he wanted to be his own lawyer?
Yes, he did. Well, he saw John Africa do it successfully. Mumia is a highly intelligent man, so he figured, But what he didn't realize was how committed they were to framing him up. Lesson, always have legal advice. Even if you want to speak for yourself, have some legal advice prepared and ready to work with you when they pull something illegal that you may not be aware of, so you can have some defense procedurally, not just the case. It is very difficult for a working person to know all of the procedures and the laws that operate in a courtroom. They actually excluded Mumia from the courtroom while he was defending himself. And I'll tell you why. He was interviewing the jury. So he was going to, participate in selecting the jury. And all the reports I've read is that Mumia was doing an excellent job. And Sabo just didn't want him to continue. So he excluded him. Period. End of it.
And that's just one of many of the systematic ways in which they've denied him any type of due process or justice.
That is correct. Mumia not only was excluded from the courtroom during his trial, but this same Judge Sabo oinked in the presence of Terry Moore Carter, the court stenographer. This is a case where they were in the back of the court having lunch, and another judge, he were comparing their dockets, what trials they were coming up.
Right.
Terry Moore Carter was sitting at the table with them, and he said, "Oh yeah, I got this case, and we're gonna help them fry the nigger." This is the judge of the case, y'all. Okay.
This is sick.
The ultimate censorship, silencing a man in court who is fighting for his life. And that's what Sabo did. Now,
well, this was silencing, but at some point this came out that the judge said that, right?
Well, okay. Now, how that came out, since you asked, is Terry Moore Carter, I think, was wise to realize how the people she was dealing with were extremely corrupt. So what she did was she retired. And when she retired, she had her checks coming to her, all that's closed. Then she came to Mumia's defense team and said, "Look, this happened." When we got that information, I was a volunteer. I simply, helped to proofread the statements that the lawyers prepared for court. Long statements, sometimes 600-page statements. Mm-hmm. But that was just on a volunteer basis. So I was keenly aware of what was coming up, what was going on. And I tell you the truth, y'all, I assumed that if this goes into court, there's no way they can hold Mumia any longer. That this was going to go through and the Mumia was eventually going to be released, because how can you have a judge referring to a defendant as a nigger in any court, how wrong I was. Enter Ronald Castile. Ronald Castile was the assistant DA when Mumia was being tried, and then he became the DA, the district attorney in Philadelphia. And he fought the early phases of Mumia's appeals. So it's clear this guy had some, quote, what they say, skin in the game, right? I should just let you know, Cebu committed 32 violations of Mumia's constitutional rights during the grossly unfair trial that Mumia went through and was eventually convicted and given the death penalty.
32.
32. I don't want to go into each one. Look,
Right.
For instance, it is a constitutional violation to remove someone from the courtroom without providing them with a television and a piece of paper and a pencil so they can deal with problems of the trial as they unfold. You don't just put somebody in the hole while they're on trial. So, I mean, that's just one of the many, many violations committed by Cebu. But now we're moving on to Ronald Castile. Now, his role as both prosecutor and judge in Mumia's case was challenged. So this came up as a result of a prisoner who the same judge, Castile, framed up as a DA, framed up this, Mr. Williams claims that he was framed up. So he went to what's called a PCRA, Post-Conviction Relief Appeal. And he shows up in court and he looks up, and the judge now is the same man, Ronald Castile, who was the district attorney when he was framed up.
And just to be clear, this Williams case is a separate case from Mumia's, but it's going to become really relevant to the opening that's happening right now.
That's right.
And kind of the occasion for why we're even talking about this.
That's right.
This particular moment right now. So say a little bit more about this. This Williams case is really important to understand. There's a lot of details here, but get to the heart of this story with Williams versus Pennsylvania.
Okay, the heart of the Williams decision, which went all the way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court decided that Williams was right, that you cannot be the DA and later on be the judge in the appeal of the same case. When we saw this, we immediately filed, because this is exactly what happened in Mumia's case with this guy, Ronald Castile. Okay? So to make it a long story short, excuse me, in the light of the Williams decision, it opened the door to a court decision vacating, that is, overturning and dismissing all of Philadelphia Supreme Court's denials of Mumia's post-conviction petitions or appeals. Very important, because Ronald D. Castile had become the Chief Justice of the Philadelphia, of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
So this can't be overstated. So this is actually a ruling in favor of Mumia for the first time in
37 years.
And what does it mean for the previous rulings against him to be, they've been overturned at this point? Or what does this mean?
They have been reopened, and basically what is going to happen is if Mumia, all right, yes, Mumia now reappeals, it's going to become very clear that the very judge that sent us the documentation saying petition denied, two-word petition denied, normally a normal judge writes why the petition was denied. This cat was raw.
Wow.
He just said petition denied, and everyone knew that something was wrong, but there's a kind of a conviviality amongst these so-called judges where you don't criticize a fellow justice.
Right.
And the injustice flows.
Wow. Okay, so this is very significant.
All right, so skeptics might say, all right, well, what if those Supreme Court dudes just won't do right? Well, they did. And here's the point. It opens up. It doesn't guarantee anything. Only the struggle can guarantee Mumia's freedom. And that is why we need people to pay attention to this and to organize around it. and to educate their fellow students, the church members, their fellow workers. We need the unions.
That's right. And so it's clear that there's an opening right now with this, the reopening of some of the appeals that Mumia has put forward. Can you maybe go into now what are some of the history of organizing efforts that have been done to support Mumia and to fight for his own release that have happened throughout the years? Because I think that hearing about that will remind people who are involved, as well as educate those of us who are maybe, weren't as active then, and hopefully give us a light forward for what we can do in this particular moment.
Okay, well, to be honest, we don't expect people like Ronald Castile to, quote, do right on their own accord. What we do expect is for our listening audience to take action for justice. May I remind you that in 1995, Pennsylvania Governor Tom Ridge signed the death warrant to execute Mumia. At this time, there was a social explosion. And to be honest, the power of the working people stayed the hand of the executioner. Very important to understand. It was the action of millions that turned that situation around.
Students, workers.
Right. And in fact, in 1999, here in the Bay Area, the longshoremen led the way. We won. The longshoremen themselves had a one-day strike up and down the coast. That is, no cargo moved on that day under the rubric of Free Mumia. We also had a march that same day in San Francisco that 25,000 people participated in. Later on, the next year, the teachers for Mumia in the city of Oakland led anti-death penalty and Free Mumia Day, where the entire day students discussed the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal and what is wrong with the death penalty. The entire day. This is the power that we do have and that we must exercise. So a little bit more, though, on recently. Mumia fell ill. He got very sick from hepatitis C. Actually, he collapsed in prison. And his comrades actually said, "Nah, man, this is wrong. This is wrong." And they demanded that he get some kind of medical treatment. When we found out about it, to be honest, I didn't understand how serious it was. But you always listen. Listen to your comrades. Listen to your co-workers and your friends, because you can change. We all change as a result of the struggle. So I began to understand how serious this was, and we began to organize in defense of Mumia to just keep him alive.
And this was just a couple of years ago, 2016 or so?
That's correct. We started off, why doesn't he just take the medicine? It winds up that there's a medicine called Harvoni, which is a pill for hepatitis C. Mumia had hepatitis C. That's why he was so sick. It winds up that a pharmaceutical corporation called Gilead Sciences, located here in Foster City, not too far from you.
Right.
They bought the patent for this. They didn't develop it, but they bought it's theirs. So what did they do? They charged 100 times what the cost of the pill is to produce, so that the pills were $1,000 a piece, so that it would cost you roughly between $80,000 and $100,000 to be cured from hepatitis C. We said, no, that's crazy. So we organized.
And we, as the Labor Action Committee and other allied organizations doing Mumia solidarity work.
That is correct. So not just, all right, we spread this out. We said we want Mumia to get treated for hepatitis C, but this is a general problem in our society. So we are for public health, not corporate wealth. In fact, that was the slogan that we adopted. And we didn't just organize people that support Mumia. We organized nurses. We got the nurses union involved. We organized with clinics that dealt with people with liver problems, because they understood what hepatitis C was, hepatitis C. So we organized people who had the need for the drug, plus health professionals, and we put together a little movement, of people that understood that this was outrageous, that anybody would charge $1,000 per pill, like that. The opportunistic, it's just so we went to our first demonstration was at the Hotel St. Francis in Union Square, where they were having a corporate meeting. Basically, I call it a flea market for all of the pharmaceutical companies and people who want to invest in those companies. And we had a picket line outside. We were chanting, had a spirited demonstration. And one of the lessons here is it pays to demonstrate sometimes, because in so doing, by demonstrating, we attracted the media, and somebody wrote up the story, and bam, now it was in the bourgeois media, the corporate media, and I'm actually shocked that the reporters didn't understand what was going on. We had to teach them, but we did. And as a result, this information got around, our coalition got stronger. We eventually had a demonstration in front of Gilead Sciences in Foster City. We had about 3 or 4 forums on this matter. We raised money and we sent it to Mumia's lawyers. A brief was filed. They sued the state of Pennsylvania, and Mumia sued not only on his own behalf, but on behalf of all of the prisoners, and won. If you are in the custody and control of the state, they have a responsibility to see that you get the appropriate medicine. So Mumia won the case and was given the Hep C medication, Harvoni, and is today Hep C free.
I mean, this is an important victory. It's not a total victory, but this is a really important
We kept
win.
him alive.
Yeah.
Yes.
And this is the work of activists who've been committed to this for a while, continuing through the ups and downs, but seeing this really important moment.
That's right.
Having your own discussions and debates about the way forward, and then taking an action locally here in the Bay Area in order to raise awareness, but also just to call attention to what was happening to this comrade who's locked up.
And look, remember, now he was alive, and then the next thing you know, same year, we get the Williams decision.
Wow.
See? And then we file, and unfortunately they take forever. But last year, December of 2018, Judge Tucker decides for Mumia.
Okay, so these are some really key events that have happened that led to this opening we have now. So now that there's this opening, we've talked a little bit about the history of the organizing, the teachers for Mumia, the longshoremen who shut down the port across the West Coast. Right. There's been other messages of solidarity on the part of unions, and
by the way, may I say this?
Please.
That all along the way that we have supported Mumia, the Labor Action Committee has supported Mumia, we never confined our efforts simply to the United States. We always saw Freedom for Mumia as being an international case. So we took this information to England and to South Africa, and formed an alliance with the Metal Workers Union, NUMSA, and I think the name of the union in England is Unite, is a union federation in England. So we have constantly worked with unions from other countries in getting out the information about Mumia Abu-Jamal.
That's really important international work that you are doing. There's also a statement that was written recently this month, January of 2019, by Keith Brown, the president of the Oakland Teachers Union, the OEA, Oakland Education Association. And I wonder if it might be useful to read it to kind of get a sense of what the call is right now, because there's a specific demand right now on District Attorney Krasner in Philadelphia, right? Do you want to read that? Or?
Sure. Dear District Attorney Krasner, teachers and educators call on you to do the right thing. Do not stand in the way of justice for Mumia Abu-Jamal. Do not appeal Judge Tucker's decision. As a progressive attorney, you ran for Philadelphia District Attorney on a platform that included standing for justice, not just for convictions. Not just for convictions, but also, you said you were opposed. He said he was opposed, for instance, to the industrial
Prison industrial complex,
etc. That's what Keith is referring to here. You promoted reviewing past convictions and freeing the wrongfully convicted.
Right.
In Philadelphia, Abu-Jamal's frame-up stands out as the city's most notorious wrongful conviction. I urge you to allow Mumia Abu-Jamal to go forward with re-arguing his appeals, which Judge Tucker states would best serve the appearance of justice. Sincerely, Keith D. Brown, President of the Oakland Education Association. So Keith wrote this, by the way, on January 1st of this year.
Great. Yeah. Shout out to Keith and the OEA for that. So given that that's the demand on District Attorney Krasner right now, what are the upcoming steps that people need to both pay attention to, but also, talk to our coworkers, our fellow students and neighbors about right now?
Okay. As I may have stated before, I've been involved in supporting Mumia Abu-Jamal since 1987. And, I've worked with a lot of people on this matter. So the number one thing we need to make sure is that people that have known about the case do not think that it's over. There's been so much on this case, it takes on the status of a saga to some extent, but that's not useful when people think that, okay, it's wrong what they've done, but they got him and there's nothing we can do about it. Well, this Tucker's decision means that there is indeed an opening. This is real and this is now. So we need to very patiently and intelligently rebuild and reignite the movement to free Mumia, because we have a chance now to see that brother walk outside of those prison walls.
All right. So before we maybe wrap it up, what are some ways in which we can follow up on that call that you just put out there? Is there an email address, or is there a phone number, a website for organizations that people who are listening might want to connect with can use to contact us?
Well, yes. I generally don't want to direct people to the internet, but because I prefer direct, communication. But right now, if you go to the Labor Action Committee's website, all of this information is available. So I think it's called the LAC.
It's laboractionmumia.org, so people can Google Labor Action Committee to Free Mumia Abu-Jamal, and the website is www.laboractionmumia.org.
Thank you very much. And that is definitely one way to tune into the facts. But we don't only want you to be well informed. That's good. We want you to be well informed. But we also, by the way, there's a program called Redacted that is on YouTube, and I think it was on Russia Today or something, that actually invited one of the former attorneys of Mumia, Rachel Walkerstein, to explain his case. So this is something that you can dial into, And if you go to our website, it's on our website.
Yeah, it's the top post there, and this is resources that people can use to host, mini forums in their, whether it's your apartment complex or your school or your university or your workplace, wherever you're at, you can gather a few people together, friends, colleagues, whatever, and discuss this and figure out ways that we can systematically pay attention to this and be ready to mobilize people to apply the appropriate pressure.
That's correct. And by the way, one always starts off small. Regathering our forces is something that we have to do systematically, step by step. I recommend that people involved in the Black student unions that have an interest in politics in our community and the nation get involved. People, they're Dylan Ruth recently, a Nazi, a neo-Nazi, they call him. A Nazi's a Nazi to me, walked into a church and murdered 9 people. That church was called the African Methodist Episcopal, right? That church since has been very active in anti-racist politics in the United States. You have to use your imagination and your creativity to reach out to people like that who are open to ideas and positive activities. So I have held, for instance, a conference on police brutality at the African Methodist Episcopal. So, you know what I mean? So, I can't tell you exactly what to do. You have to look at what are your opportunities? Who do you know?
Right.
So if you're a student, try to bring it to your school. If you worship every week, find out a lot of churches have justice committees and things like that. And just talk to people and see if they're interested in taking this forward. But for sure, your workplace, your union, more and more our unions are starting to understand that they cannot simply be a place that collects dues. The Janus decision forced many trade union, business unionists to reconsider that and understand that unions can and should play a positive role in the struggle for social justice.
All right, so these are some really clear ideas and that we can use to sort of guide our way forward in figuring out how to fight for Mumia's release. So thanks a lot, Gerald, for coming in, and then we'll have more information as it comes out.
Thank you very much, brother.
All right, and to wrap up the segment, we're going to hear a commentary by Mumia Abu-Jamal titled A Rap Thing off of the Hard Knock Radio Presents 175 Progress Drive compilation, followed by a track titled Mumia 911 by the Unbound All-Stars, which is featuring Wise Intelligent, AC Alone, Pharaoh Monch, Afu Ra, Goldilocks, Slim Kid Trey, Saeed, Zach De La Rocha, Jean Grey, Tragedy, Channel Live, Dead Prez, Chuck D, Divine Sister, The Last Emperor, Black Thought, and Peace. Enjoy.
You remind me of my Jeep, I wanna wax you, babe. Remind me of my bank account, I wanna spin you, babe. That's from You Remind Me of Something by R. Kelly. The song is smooth, with a funky bottom and a sexy lead vocalist. Why does it grit my teeth every time I hear it? Well, it's not because I'm, as one of my sons put it, an old man who just can't interpret the young whippersnappers. That said, I must admit I'm more at home with R&B, with the soft significance of an Anita Baker or even Brownstone, singers like Sade and, yes y'all, Whitney. I also enjoy much of rap for its vitality, its rawness, its irreverence, and its creativity. Rap is an authentic descendant of a people with ancient African oral traditions, from griots who sang praise songs to their kings, to bluesmen who transmuted their pain into art. For a generation born into America's chilling waters of discontent, into the 1970s and 80s, into periods of denial, cutbacks, and emergent white supremacy, one must understand how love songs sound false and discordant, out of tune with their gritty survivalist realities. When their mothers and fathers were teenagers, Curtis Mayfield sang, "We're winners, and never let anybody say that you can't make it, 'cause some people's mind is in your way. We're moving on up." Earth, Wind, and Fire in exquisite harmony, "Keep Your Head to the Sky," and Bob Marley and the Wailers thundered over rolling bass line, "Get up, stand up for your rights." The hip-hop generation came into consciousness on Tina Turner's "What's Love Got to Do With It?" or an egocentric mix that glorified materialism, like Run DMC's "My Adidas" about a pair of sneakers, or Houdini's "Friends, How No One Can Be Trusted." Their parents grew up in the midst of hope and black liberation's consciousness. The youth grew up in a milieu of dog-eat-dogism, of America's retreat from its promises, of Reaganism and white right-wing resurgence. In that sense, rap's harshness merely reflects a harsher reality of lives lived amidst broken promises. How could it be otherwise? At its heart, though, rap is a multi-billion-dollar business permeating America's commercial culture and influencing millions of minds. It is that all-American corporationism that transforms rap's grittiness into the gutter of materialism. A woman, a living being, reminds a man of a thing, a car. That, to me, is more perverse than the much criticized bitches and hoes comments. This is especially objectionable when one notes that in America, in the last century, in the eyes of the law, blacks were property, chattel, things like wagons owned by whites. That a black man, some 3 generations later, could sing that a black woman, his God-given mate, his female self, could remind me of my Jeep amazes me. This isn't, nor could it be, a condemnation of rap. The late Tupac Shakur's "Dear Mama" and "Keep Your Head Up" are shining examples of artistic expressions of loving oneness with one's family and people. Creative, moving, loving, funky, angry, and real are that late young man's works, as is a fair amount of the genre. Like any art form in America, it is also a business with the influences of the marketplace impacting upon its production. The more conscious its artists, the more conscious the art. Keep your head up. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal.
What he said was so clear, so true, that I had to stop everything and concentrate on his message.
We need masters in biology, zoology to overtake Illuminati trick knowledge, transform, reciprocate your mental state. Now make a date to overtake your objective. Show that through life that everything is connected, but not in categories, cause that's the devil's story. Symbols of cannibalism ruin your vision. The thoughts formulate in your mind with no precision.
He paid a cruel price for what they call life. Dealt with it briefly, took him out that night. Some ask why, I'ma say they hate the look in his eyes. Like a child of ill omen, they want him crucified. The last on the battlefield, the last alive. Besides, they don't want the African to survive. Sabo, the son of Satan, was involved in the plot. Legalized the homicide, his soul
Yo,
going
the
right.
attempted assassination of Mumia Jamal, they set him up. I come to find out, Tupac, they wet him up. Pharaoh, standing behind my curtains with a double barrel rehearsing. Ready for war now for certain. Biological warfare suits. Black gas masks, black boots, half-ass become troops. My guns are dope, but warriors are booty now. Plenty thug, it's a fruity now. Freedom is that cold road seldom traveled. By the multitude, we need to dig through this gravel so we can cultivate this food. Motivate a few of you fools, regenerate the mood. Free ourselves from mental bondage, free ourselves from family feuds. And follow me through this prophecy. Building our colonies where our pillars and columns be. Bigger than the Coliseum, I call them like I see them. The devil does a devil dance. Now they wanna murder Mumia, take action, it's the only chance. They telling me, son, grab a gun or two. Money gon' come to you. Stop rhyming about what white people done to you. Look, burn a blunt or two. Screw who you wanna screw. Do what you wanna do, and let sin win for you. Kill all that teaching. It's too much cheese to get. And if Jesus exists, just don't believe in it. Eat the bread of wickedness. Join the global Satanists. Give death row sentences to black revolutionists.
Now they will playing God. just to feel the power, not to justify that of you and I. Holding daggers up and letting you decide after passing information that's falsified. Stand behind a lie. What does it cost to die? What does it cost to live? Why do they specify these terms of why when they ain't the most high? What they fear they will kill, but the soul will never die.
Through seasons, legions and demons, bleeding heathens and even Stevens. I wandered through regions, these freezing evenings and grieving till breathing reasons would freeze cats like Cleveland. Now shit seeming like semen, sliding home on the deacon. Weaving my mental from potential through Mumia's mind. Behind these bars, diamonds scarred for the cause. I climb all 50 schemes to lock cats in Mars like dogs. The fog will clear like tears after a resolution. This daily flight through evolution.
You see, the capital thugs got nervous, cause he refused to be their servant. Cause he spit truth that shook heads and burned like black churches. Prose and verses, filled with a million black hearses. Watch, see the vision of Dred Scott as it reverses. So long as they rope is tight around Mumia's neck, let there be no rich white life we bound to respect. Cause and effect, can't you smell the smoke in the breeze? My panther, my brother, we are at war until you're free.
My motherfuckers to the front line, ready with guns cocking. We'll storm the prisons, get the wards rocking. Snipe all the FBI and cops clocking. Philly officials' bodies dropping. Avenge the 85 bombing. Eye for an eye, we'll hang them by the Capitol steps. Snap their necks, snatch their vests, equip my children with text. People protecting feds, calling murder legal execution. Free the righteous, I face the bloody revolution.
Federal indictment, militant mind, enlightenment. Son, we outburst in the courtroom, full of excitement. Face the jury, thugged out with blind fury. They want us all under the jail, end of the story. Brave and heartless, we can have a million marches, but when you black, you under attack, son. Regardless, live by the gun, done, and die by the gun, and revolutionize minds until freedom won.
Scream bloody murder inside of my head. The execution is clock controlled by the feds. Take illegal action, they want Mumia dead. This nation's savages been trying to kill us for years.
We watch wizards play games in Washington with your life. Swung with Spider-Man, now we swing websites. Hell's Kitchen, living ill-conditioned, body cloning, switching, CIA lynching, Mumia trapped in prison. Marilyn Manson, mainstream, aliens visiting. My skin's a misdemeanor when Siren B screams. And wonder why the live channel got attitude. The times got us heated like 0 degrees latitude. Can you keep a secret like society? The eye is on the rooftop. They got me under surveillance like they had Biggie and Tupac. Yo, I saw 2 rocks, heard 2 shots, the level of my view dropped. They crazed me but didn't faze me. I fired back and hit 2 cops. Yo, I bubble through the jungle like Indiana Jones with the key that unlocks the science of microphones. Hit reverse, disperse. The stereo planet Earth because the first shall be last and the last shall be first.
Yo, if Mumia dies, fires in the skies, rebel cries, we politicize. Brothers with the lies uncovered. Look for me in the whirlwind. Dare to struggle, dare to win. Long live the Panthers, comrades with answers. Freeing all political prisoners of war. Freeing the poor, open the door. Keep your hands off Assad, stop the ism, schism, prison economy that we live in. Impeach the president, keep on fighting till they give in.
I say the police, cause they've been killing us for years. This ain't no free country. Niggas get murdered for their ideas. Free Mumia means all Africans let go. Cause just living in the ghetto put you on death row. You don't know? You seen how they try to do asada to some real organize themselves and win and got a lot of crackers verbalize if Mumia dies. Fire in the skies, but only time will tell the truth from the lies.
And you keep the illusion, cause I see my people's losing the overall battle to keep Republic rats from choosing. After all, I feel the bruising of the Constitution. With my back's against the wall, manifesting in their destiny. They just tested me, Mumia's spirit blessing me. No alibi, I know allies, not their ally. I believe I can fly, but this type of freedom is a lie. So it's time doing Darwin degrees. Within the means of God's speed, feel the supreme penalties. Black non-fiction remains the weapon of choice. Reject the illusion of justice, and why is the black voice? The passion behind the veil, the flesh behind the bars, the spirit in front the force. Who's deaf and who's cause? Break the black man down in front of black famine all. Guilty as you all, free Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Shaitan will destroy anything for the right price. In the physical world, one man cannot die twice. To the spiritual world, your soul cannot fly twice. Yet could this be the second time they crucify Christ? Ask Ed Asner, the actor, after they execute him. There will be a peasant uprising like the French Revolution. In conclusion, if you detect evil, free the voice of the voiceless, defender of oppressed. They want us knocked, locked down, boxed up in the ground. It's wartime now, from how to suffer and sound. We deep in the realm, the planet petrified, overwhelmed. We all stars, living life out on surveillance film. New world law enforced, mind rape, cerebral holocaust, no escape. Fire for burn, the execution date shatter. We on the front lines prepared. I want Mumia out the cage, the time for action is here.
This is a PSA to the PSC and the PPD. Mumia Abu-Jamal must be set free. How would y'all like it if we took it to the streets in a discreet fashion, still smashing? Underground arsenal of lyricists, live from death row. We want the voice of the voiceless, fully clothed and ready to go. And if not, you will witness the largest uprising you've ever seen before. April 24, 1954.